What's up? Welcome to No Tracers, the show all about urban exploration. If you're into abandoned buildings, if you like to explore abandoned shit, this is a podcast for you. If you are a photographer that is just getting into the hobby, or if you're just somebody that's curious about urban exploring and how it works, or maybe you know my guest, the Trespastor. This is No Tracers. Welcome to the show. Step into the world of decay, abandonment, and chaos. The story of an urban explorer starts here, at the beginning. Welcome to the podcast you've been looking for all along. This is No Tracers. Here, we take only photos. We leave only footprints. And remember, leave no trace. So now that we've had a little introduction, what's up? My name's Kay. I'm your host on the show, No Tracers. This week, as I said just a second ago, I have the Trespastor on the podcast. If you don't know who he is, go check out his Instagram, or, you can also watch this on YouTube. I do have a YouTube version with like his photos and the audio underneath. That's No Tracers Urbex on YouTube. Go check it out if you want to see his photos, or you can just hit him up on Instagram at the.trespastor. And you can listen to this episode while you're possibly exploring an abandoned building, or maybe you're on your way to a bando. I don't know where you're tuning in from, but thank you for tuning in regardless. If you're new to the show, hit that subscribe button for me. We have new episodes come out every Friday. If you're listening to this episode, it means that I am currently in Europe. If you're listening to this episode when it comes out in June, I'm in Europe with my band Matriarchs. Hopefully I am, in an abandoned castle somewhere or something crazy before I play a show. But yes, I am a metal screamer and singer in the band Matriarchs. I also have another project under my name, Kay Inigonio, or Chasing Satellites. You can look up either of those and it'll take you to like the same music. Thank you guys for tuning into the podcast this week. Before we get into it, a couple things just to let you know a little bit more about the show, how you can support the show, things like that. So I have a couple of books out. One is a photography book called No Tracers, an Urban Explorer's Diary. It's a coffee table book, like a photography book with my stories and my photos. And I just released last month a book that is an urban exploration guidebook. So if you want to see some really cool artwork and photos and some tips and tricks for urban exploring, if you're just getting into the hobby, or if you like to collect photo books, things like that, check out notracers.com/shop. Over there, you can also find t-shirts, hats, backpacks, duffel bags. If you bring a bunch of clothes in, if you're a model and you need a bag, No Tracers duffel bags are super cool. I actually have one with me on tour. I put my clothes in it. It's great. Love it. So last thing I need to say is that I have a partner on this podcast, and that is Liquid Death Mountain Water. If you've never heard of Liquid Death Mountain Water, well, it is an amazing company. They make water, or they distribute water. They don't make water. I mean, can you make water? I don't fucking know how that works, but they distribute water in cans, and they donate some of the proceeds of their company to cleaning up the ocean. And I think that is super cool. I am all about, recycling as much as possible if you can. So they distribute canned water. They have still water, sparkling water, and they have 3 flavors of water: Buried Alive, which is a berry flavor water, Mango Chainsaw, and Severed Lime instead of Severed Limb. Get it? Okay, their whole thing is horror theme. Murder Your Thirst is their slogan. So if you want 10% off a case, or maybe 50 cases, I don't know how much water you drink or want, you could get a whole pallet. If you manage a bar and you want some sparkling flavored water, hit up liquiddeath.com and use code JustTheLetterK for 10% off your order. Supply your bar, man. Supply your bar, your venue, your concert venue. There's so many avenues you could go with this water. So definitely go to liquiddeath.com and use code JustTheLetterK for 10% off. And without further ado, let's get into this episode of No Tracers with the Trespastor. Please introduce yourself and how long you've been exploring to the No Tracers audience.
Yeah, so people refer to me as the Trespastor, and I've been exploring for 3 or 4 years, I think. The name the Trespastor actually came from a student of mine, because I was actually a pastor of a church for 3 years. And
wow.
So one of my students, he came up to me one day and he was like, "Hey, you're a pastor that trespasses. So does that make you a trespastor?" And I was like, "I'm keeping that." That was perfect. Um, so I had my full name out there at one point, but as I started getting into like a little bit more of like the heavier spots, I guess you could say, I didn't want personal information out there to link back. So just took that and put it up, and it took off. And yeah, so I get recognized around that with that name, and it's pretty fun. I like it, so it's a good fit.
We love a
Um,
clever name, man.
yeah, yeah, right. Yep.
The
But
Trespastor. Oh, it
yeah,
kills me.
no, believe me. As soon as he said it, I just busted out laughing, and I was like, I just couldn't stop laughing, and then it just fit well because like I've always been a big fan of church architecture as well.
Sure.
I have a little side project with a couple of friends of mine that I'm trying to turn to something eventually. Not really too big just yet, but we're going around and we're documenting and photographing current active churches and their impact on communities, and all the stuff that they've done and everything. But I mean, I would absolutely prefer to be more involved with the abandoned church, obviously. So, but yeah, I mean, just been exploring for 3 or 4 years, and I've met a lot of cool people through it, and it's been fun. It's been fun. Had some wild rides and seen some cool things and gone to some cool places. So it's a big passion for sure.
Oh yeah, definitely. And can you take me into your very first exploration that made you like catch the bug and you were just like, I gotta keep doing this. Like this is a thing.
Yes, 100%. So there was this old slaughterhouse. It's called Thornapple Valley. It's like literally just this big open building of pillars. And my youth pastor at the time was just getting into photography, and he was like, "Hey, let's go out and let's take some photos, and you can just kind of come along with me." And I was like, "All right, sure." And as we went past south of 8 Mile, shout out to Eminem,
Yeah,
but
let's go.
we went south of 8 Mile, and I was like, "Where the heck are we going, dude?" And he's like, "Oh, we're just going downtown." And my dad had always kind of painted like a pretty rough painting of like what Detroit was, because let's just be honest, Detroit's got a pretty bad rap for a lot of things. Um, so I was kind of sketched out, and we pulled up to. I thought when he said downtown, we were just going to go, to like the Rensen or just get some city shots. But we pull up to this old abandoned slaughterhouse, and he's like, "All right, man, let's go." And I was like, "No." I was like, "There's no way you're getting me in there right now." He's like, "Well, I mean, if you don't want to go in, you can sit in the car." And I was like, "Nope, not doing that either." So we went in, and I didn't even have a camera at the time. I just was like trying to make the best with my crummy little phone. And we just walked in, and I was like, "Whoa, man, like this is crazy." It just, there was like so many, like it's like the energy kind of hits you,
Yeah.
and it's like you're stepping into history, right? So I started thinking to myself, like, what was this place like when it was running? What were the people like? How much was their paycheck back in the day? Because money fluctuated severely throughout the years, and how much pay would go. Who owned the building, um, and just like there wasn't anything there. It literally was just an empty shell. But you could kind of just begin to picture, like what it was kind of like. And then on top of that, Detroit's really well known for its graffiti. We got a lot of just dope graffiti artists here, and a lot of them had hit this building. So the color in it, even though it was just gray pillars and gray ground, it just popped with all this graffiti color. And I was like, I was watching him photograph things, and he was kind of showing me the shots that he took, and I was like, dude, I want to do this so bad. Um, so I ended up buying this I think it was an SL1, a Canon SL1 with like a little lens, just a 50 mil. And I went back to this spot with a buddy of mine, and I started taking pictures of what I could with that kind of millimeter range.
Mm-hmm.
and just was looking through, and I was like, okay, I need to go to every single abandoned place that I possibly can as often as I can. um, so it just, after that, it kind of just took off. I met some good people and made some good connections, and we started going to places and started getting a little riskier, and it's brought me to where I'm at now. And yeah, and so that was definitely like the highlight, the first experience. And
Oh,
then the
for sure.
floor ended up caving in there, so that was
Wow.
insane. And then there was this rickety like ladder that someone had nailed together, two pieces that went up to the roof.
Sick.
It was like, it was the sketchiest thing in the world. But you get up there, and then I think the second time I went up there, I was on the roof, and this cop pulls up, and he pulls over, and he looks right up at me on the roof. And I didn't know the rules, so I was like, anybody can be in here. So I'm just standing on the roof, and I just wave at him, and he rolls his window down, pokes his head out, pulls his shades down a little bit, waves at me, and just takes off. And I was like, sweet.
Shut up.
Yep.
No way.
So, but yeah, that's definitely the first place. That's where I, caught the addiction. And yeah, it's just, that's it. It's history after that.
Yo, that's hilarious. What a fucking crazy interaction with a cop. Like
Yeah.
no, that never like that never happens, you realize.
Mhm.
Like that's not a thing. Like I've heard one other story on this show where it was like a group of people and they were exploring, I think it was like an old greenhouse or something, and the cops show up and the cops ended up like giving them a tour of the place. They were like,
What
"Here,
in
check
the
this
world?
out and look at this." And I'm like, "This does not happen. Like who are these people that you're running into? Like what?" It's
Yeah.
nuts.
I've,
So,
I've I've got a buddy who is a police officer, actually. And
oh,
so
nice.
I've talked to him about spots, and how many calls they get, and he's like, dude, it's Detroit. Like, that's the last thing they're worried about right now.
Exactly.
So yeah.
Yeah. And, I've come to realize that, in cities, like I was just in Alabama, like in a city in Alabama, exploring a giant abandoned hospital. And this
Ooh.
was like 2 days ago. And like there's like fences kind of outside, but the main entrance, like the door, there's no door, there's no boarding, there's no fence. That literally we just like walked right in. And I was
Yep.
like, is this actually happening right now? Like
Hmm.
what the fuck? And this cop, like we get up to like the ninth floor of this place, and there's usually like in a building there's a wall or a window at the end of the hallway, and there was nothing. It was just a drop off the side of the building. So this was
Why?
my girlfriend's first exploration, right? I brought her
Yep.
into a massive abandoned hospital. I was like, here you go, this is what I do. So her first explore was this like just gigantic mega hospital. And she gets over to like the wall where there is no wall, right? And she sees a cop like slow rolling down the street, and she's like, what do we do? And I was like, we should probably like leave, right now before, like cops not going to go in the abandoned building. Like that's not a thing. It's a
No.
very rare occurrence for them to be like, I'm going to go risk my life to see if there's like some asshole in this abandoned place. They don't really do that. But,
Hmm.
we see them and we immediately are like, oh, we got to jet. Like we got to get out of here. But for you, you were talking about like you started doing more risky things. Like what has been your riskiest or your most dangerous exploration?
Oh man. Okay. Yeah. So I I was kind of hoping that I'd get to share this one, because I usually keep this on the DL. But
Let's go.
this is a fun one. So there was this big hotel that I saw people posting. It was just a couple shots, and I was like, man, I really want this, but it looked too clean to be abandoned. I was kind of like,
Okay.
maybe this is just closed, but
Hmm.
at the same time, we hadn't seen anybody use it, at least for a year, online. But it still had, like, you could still call in to check in a room. So
Wow.
I was like, okay, this is kind of risky business, but let's just give it a shot. So we go there, and the doors open. Like, someone just kind of stuck a ladder like right in the rotating door. So, but if you rotated it the other way, you could completely dodge that. So it was a horrible security system. But I went there the first time, was sketched out, kind of left quick, right? So we go back a second time, and I'm like, all right, let's stay in here for a little bit. And I had some buddies that came in out of state, and we were in there for a good hour and a half, like no problem, shooting everything we could. And I was like, this is so cool. Like this whole spot is so clean, no graffiti, nothing. So a couple of my friends after I had come back, they were like, "Hey man, can you take us to that hotel?" And I kind of get that often. I'm like somewhat of a tour guide, I guess. And I don't claim to be the best in no way, but I've made my way around to some spots. So I was like, yeah, let's just give it a shot. So we go over there. It's like 8:30 in the morning, and we pull up and we go in. And I was like, all right, let's just stay away from these really big windows, because there was these massive windows in the section where the pool was, and you could easily see us in there from the parking lot. I was like, let's stay away from that. Well, maybe within 15 minutes, I see this car circling the hotel outside, and I was like, oh crap. Like I think someone is, they know that we're in here. So I'm like hunkered down, and I'm looking to make sure that it's not a police officer, and I don't see any tag on the name. um there's like nothing on the car that's identifying that it's a cop. So I'm like, okay, let's just wait until he goes around, and then we'll kind of make our way out, right? um but because we had been approached by locals in Detroit for like really weird people, it's kind of like you have that little sketch factor on you.
Mm-hmm.
And usually I don't run, but for some reason we ran this time. So we took off, and unbeknownst to me, this guy sped up around the back of the hotel so he could come back around just in case we booked it. And we ran at the exact same time he did that. So we're rushing through this like office space across the street, and we're trying to lose him, and he's not being shaken at all. And I was like, what the heck? So we finally get in my car, kind of lost him a second. He ends up getting behind us, and I'm kind of panicked at this point. So like we're booking it through stop signs and red lights and just like going through everything, and he's not shaking. And I was like, what? There's no way this guy is just a local person trying to keep us from, like being in this hotel. So finally I just was like, let's just give up. I mean, let's just see what he wants. And we pulled over, and he rolled his window down. He's like, you might as well just stop. I'm an off-duty police officer. And I was like,
Fuck.
oh my gosh. So I pulled over, and I'm sitting on the, like my buddy is hyperventilating. Like he's about to pass out, and he's like, I'm going to go to jail. I'm going to go. And I was like, calm down, calm down. Like we gotta play this cool. So I just said, listen, this is the story. Because we didn't look like we were, bando hunting. We just kind of like looked like we were just going to take some portraits, right? So I was like, this is the story. A buddy of ours came out of New York, hit the hotel, said it was a cool place to take some portraits. We're gonna take some portraits, and we do this in Detroit. We got spooked because we didn't see that it was a cop car, and we thought it was a local who was going to cause us harm, so we ran. And they were like, okay, okay, okay. And I was like, listen, I can keep a level head, so I'll do the talking. So I go out, and I'm like, hey, can my friend sit on the curb? Like he's freaking out, and I think he's going to have a heart attack. And he's like, do we need to call an ambulance? I was like, no, it's fine. He just needs to get some fresh air. So he's like, yeah, that's fine. He's like, just to let you know, I read your license plate pretty much right in the beginning. Called the cops already. They're on their way. And I was like, oh, crap. So I was like, listen, if I would have known that you were a police officer, I would have not ran. I was like, we do this in Detroit. We've been approached by some, crazy people. And he's like, yeah, I get it. Just go ahead and sit down. And I was like, okay. So unbeknownst to us, when these cops pulled up, the guy was an off-duty officer. He was there at that time to meet with the owner of the hotel to increase security measures.
Shut up.
And we pulled up at the worst time ever. And he's like, yeah, I saw you through those windows. And I was like, of course you did. Of course you did. Hence why I said don't be there. But, whatever. And he's like, yeah, so the other two cops pulled in, and they were like, what were you doing in there? And I was like, we were just taking some portraits. A friend of mine said they had a cool little bar section, so it'd be cool to get some portraits. And we were just sitting down to shoot, and we got spooked. And he's like, all right, well, can we see the photos? And I was like, yeah, I guess. So my buddy grabbed his camera, showed him the photos that he had taken. While he was doing that, I was deleting the ones off my Instagram because I had my name on it at the time. So just in case they looked me up, I didn't want them seeing that I had been in there already. Yeah. So I'm deleting those while they're doing that. And they just were like, hey, you know, stay out of abandoned buildings. You could get stabbed by a heroin needle or something. And I was like,
Tight.
okay, yeah, for sure. And he's like, so just, don't go back to that hotel, but we'll let you go. And I was like, what the heck? And
Wow.
there were so many stop signs and so many red lights I went through in front of this cop. I was like, there's no way we should have walked away with that. And for the whole day, we were just like, how are we not in jail right now?
Yeah.
Like,
For
there's
real.
no way. But it turns out that like some other people had been coming in there and kind of busting things up and stealing the alcohol bottles they had left in
Oh,
there and messing with the piano. And the owner was getting pissed. So he's like,
sure.
let's just figure out how to fix this. And we just happened to go the day of that meeting. And I was like, this is
Yo.
ridiculous. But that's definitely one of my probably my craziest story. And for a couple of people were trying to go there after, and I was telling them that, and they didn't believe me. They were like, no, you're just trying to keep people out. I was like, I'm not a gatekeeper, man. Like, I don't want you getting screwed over here. So it's just not worth it. But
Wow.
yeah, that was
Yo.
crazy.
I love it. That's like a huge reason I do this podcast, because we see these photos and we're like, dang, that's a dope ass place. Like, but like, what? How did you get that photo? Like, who are you? Who are these photographers on Instagram? Like, I need to know the stories. So like, that's
Yep.
where the podcast really came from. And like, so thank you for diving into that. I know you said you like to keep that story on the low key, but I mean, like, it's dope to hear stuff like that, like getting away with it, like it's always you have that like adrenaline afterwards and you're like, we're fucking invincible, man.
Yep. And that's, he told us, he was like, look, just stay out of places. And we were like, yeah, we will. And then like 3 days later, who wants to
Just
go
like
out?
that.
Who wants to go out and shoot more stuff? So
Absolutely.
but it makes it, my buddy put it perfectly. He said the photos are always, awesome, but just like you said, it's the story that makes it worthwhile. It's the memory
Yeah.
that you have attached to it. So we all talk about that from time to time. One of my friends involved, he moved over to Mexico. So he's, out there living, and he still sends us messages, and he's like, remember that time that we should have been in jail, but we weren't? Yeah.
Like every year on the anniversary, he's gonna start sending you like photos and shit and be like,
Right.
hey,
Pretty
you
much.
guys remember this? It's so good. Oh my god. Do you have any urban exploration injury stories?
Yeah, actually, I took a brick to the head, getting into
Sorry,
a
what?
church.
One more time.
I took a brick to the head. And I also pulled my neck pretty hard, helping a friend out of a church. So I'll tell you those two. It's kind of funny.
Yes.
So there's this one church here, where the door kind of comes open from time to time, but me and my friend had tried to kind of scope this one out before you saw a lot of posts on Instagram. It was kind of still like people weren't really going for it because it was kind of hard to get into. Because if the door wasn't shut, what you had to do is you had to move some boards away from this hole in the brick wall in the basement foundation, and then you had to move these metal bars away, which is noisy, obviously. Mind you, the visual point of seeing you get into this hole is on the highway, so people are obviously going to see you're going in. And right next door is like this rehab hotel where like a bunch of people who are like being rehabilitated are just walking around staring at you. So we're just like, all right. So we go there at like 5:30 in the morning. It's raining. And I was just like, this sucks. It was cold. And if you're not familiar with a Michigan winter,
It's the worst.
it just sucks. It sucks. Yes. So it's raining. It's cold. It's 5:30. We're trying to climb in here, and I go in, and you drop down into this 8-foot basement, right? So like you can't see anything, and there's a bunch of shrubbery at the bottom that we ended up landing in. So like I don't know why that was there, but I got in finally, and then my friend was coming down, and when she reached to grab this like part of the foundation to hold herself up, I'm looking down to see if there's anything on the floor. She pushes a brick off the foundation, and the corner of it literally just sharp
Oh.
pains me in the scalp. And I'm trying so hard not to scream because it hurts so bad, but you can't. So she's up there trying to get down, going shh, and I'm like, I'm trying so hard. But definitely that one was worth it. Like we got a shot in there, and then after a door opened up, I went back there and got some shots, and it was like a year later, so you could definitely see the like the increase in knowledge of using the camera. But that brick freaking hurt. And then same person, different church, same situation. We had to crawl. Like this place had been boarded up for God knows how long, and it's quite a famous church around here. And we had to crawl through this window well. Someone had yanked up like this steel fencing that covered the window, so you had to like slink through there, and then another drop into a basement that was just muddy and mucky. So we go in there. Unbeknownst to us, there were at the time there were silent alarms. So we probably tripped something in there at some point, and I heard sirens, and she heard sirens. So we were like, all right, we should probably get out of here. So we go back down the stairs, and she had to get up onto my back to get up to the window. So I had to like hoist her up. And when she went to step forward, she stepped on my head and pushed my neck down. But I didn't want her to fall, so I'm straining my neck trying to hold her up with my head to get her up to this window. I ended up pulling a neck muscle for like a week. I couldn't turn my
Oh.
neck. Um, but she didn't know that. So she finally got out, and then she was able to hoist me out. But yeah, I couldn't move my neck very well for a good week after that one. It was pretty rough. But I mean, like falling through a floor, or, any kind of really, really rough injuries. Not aside from just the brick and the neck crack, pretty much.
I mean, a brick to the head. That sounds like a pretty bad time to me. I don't want to experience anything like that. It sounds
It
horrible.
it sucked. And you know what? You know what sucked even worse about that is like I was so freaked out because I didn't know about this place and we didn't know about this place that I took that brick for the crummiest cell phone shot ever. It was like it wasn't even really worth it at that point. But then
Amazing.
when it opened back up, then it was totally worth it because we just went in there.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, hey, still has that memory attached to it, and that was it was worth it in my opinion. That's it for somewhat, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about your scariest exploration?
Oh, my scariest. So I definitely the cop thing that definitely was freaky.
Mhm.
But I had a run in with a pretty big dog that scared the crap out of me. Um, there was a place that used to be here called the Cadillac Stamping Plant. Some
Yep.
people knew it as the Ivan Dover Spike Plant or Connor Stamping Plant, but it got demoed I think a year ago or so. And it was one of those like if someone asked me if they wanted to go, I'd take them to as like their first spot because it was super chill. So I had been there about like 12 or 13 times, and I kind of walked in like I had owned the place, and I started to get comfortable and cocky. And I guess this is just the way of the game to show you to not get comfortable in spots.
Yep.
But I was going down this staircase just talking like, no, like nobody's business. And out of the nowhere comes this big white dog, and it is pissed, and it's snarling and barking at me, and I'm cornered by a staircase, right? And I had two friends behind me. I turned around, and my friends were gone. They just booked it back up and left me. And I'm like, are you kidding? So this dog was super mad, and I've heard stories of like scrappers dogs going after people, or
Mm.
like rabid dogs, just like biting and people getting infected by it. So I was panicked, and I was like, okay, do I like turn around and try to book it up this staircase and have him chase me, or do I try to just like calm him down? So I chose to just like slink up the stairs slowly, made it back up. I went up. I had to go up, I think, back 3 floors to the roof. And then there was this like slanted like door cover above where you could walk out onto the roof. My
Uh-huh.
friends ran all the way up back to the roof and then went back up onto the slanted thing so they wouldn't get caught by this dog. And I walked back up and I found him, and I was like, "You two just left me to die. Like how could you?" So we had to go back down the staircase. It was the only staircase we could take down from the roof because we went up the wrong side. So we're pretty much hugging the wall, trying to make the least amount of noise that we could to avoid stirring this dog again. And finally, we made it down after like 15, 20 minutes of just roasting on the roof in the sun. We finally made it back down. But yeah, my adrenaline was pumping hard that entire time. And then I told a friend of mine about it, and he ended up going to the freaking place and feeding the dog hot dogs. And I was like, are you kidding me?
Shut up.
I'm not even joking. He literally had a video of him dropping hot dogs off this ledge. The dog's barking and snarling. He's just like, just here, eat. I was like, you're ridiculous, dude. But yeah, that's definitely one of them.
Yeah, that place is so notorious. My last guest, Mr. P Explores, actually brought that place up. Like literally, I just finished recording with him before I jumped into this session with you, and he talked about the Cadillac stamping plant. Like it's so well known, well known.
Yeah, I know him too. He's got some really good work, really good stuff. He makes his way to Detroit quite often, and gets some like angles of photos of places that you wouldn't really consider much. He knows how to make like just random corners and graffiti pieces like look like art. So yeah, he's a good guy.
Definitely. And what do you do when you're not exploring abandoned places now?
Just wanting to explore more, pretty much. No,
for sure.
I do like occupation wise, I work with a construction company around here that fixes up abandoned homes and makes them
No way.
Yep. So I work in the city, and people will they'll pick up homes for cheap in some rougher neighborhoods, and then they'll call us, and we go in there and we just rehab them pretty much.
Wow.
And my boss was looking for a social media manager and a photographer and a delivery guy at the time, and I was like, I can do all three of those. So I literally started taking photos of abandoned homes for my job.
Dude, you found a loophole.
Exactly. So I would do that, and then on the deliveries, when I was taking items to people's houses, I drive by spots, and I'm just like, okay, I gotta add that to my list to see if I can come back to and hit. And then just with the social media management, I was able to just learn better tricks and stuff on promoting work and promoting your stuff. So it kind of ties in, honestly. So I'm pretty much always thinking about abandoned places and spots. There's actually a church that was abandoned for a little while. The only pictures that I've seen of it personally were from Detroit Unseen. Man, he's just like the OG down here. But we ended up actually turning that church into a cafe. My job did.
Wow.
So we rehabbed it into a cafe, kept the stained glass in there. The organ pipes are still there. And you get to kind of like on the ceiling, there's still some of the chipping and the decay. We kind of like cleaned that up, but still left it there for the character. And the owners are really cool, and they like it. It's called the Congregation Detroit. So if you ever have like a downtime where you're looking for a dope cafe to get some good food, that's definitely like the best spot in my opinion. Plus it's an abandoned church in the beginning, so you just get the best of both worlds.
Oh man, that's so cool.
Yeah,
I love seeing like the rehab stuff. Go ahead.
Yeah, but aside from that, the other stuff that I like to do is I actually am a magician. I do sleight of hand and all kinds of different stuff. And then I'm still involved in ministry at my church with I do youth ministry. So yeah, I jack of all trades, master of none.
Amazing. We've actually had Detroit Unseen on the podcast. His story is crazy. Urban exploring saved his life. Like he was, addicted to drugs at one point and was doing drugs in the abandoned places, and then fell in love with the abandoned places, and it literally brought him like into recovery.
Yes.
Amazing story.
He is incredible. Just definitely one of my heroes. I give the hugest shout out to him to anybody I talk to, just because like he's got so much good stuff, and he's such a humble guy. I don't know if you've seen the documentary that he put together with Abandoned Central. I've watched that about 7 times. It's just like, it just never gets old. But yeah, he's awesome. And that's so sick. You got him on the show. I didn't see that, so I'm gonna go back and listen to that for sure.
Yeah, definitely dive into that one. He goes into his full story, and it's amazing to hear, honestly, like where he came from and where he is now, and how much he really loves the abandonment and urban exploring. Like it truly saved him, and I think that this it goes to show that this is more than just a hobby. Like this is really an outlet for a lot of people, and
Oh yeah.
it gives us a place to escape. And can you talk about personally, like the mentality of an urban explorer? Like, why do you keep doing this? What do you get out of it mentally?
Yeah, there's I think there's two things. One, personally for me, it kind of ties in with my faith. But I believe, obviously, like we live in a world that's pretty broken and pretty messed up. And there's a lot of things that go on, a lot of people that struggle with a lot of things, and a lot of our problems kind of create this sense of brokenness, or dilapidation, for another word. um, and when I this is when I went into my first abandoned church. It was just crazy to kind of see it in that state. But personally, for my faith, it's kind of like that's how God finds people, right? Like people are broken. They have a lot of things that have hurt them in life that they're struggling with, and God wants to rehabilitate that, right? So it's kind of like I almost put myself in the image of this abandoned church. Like
Mm.
there was one point in time where my structure was broken, where there was a lot of things that I was struggling with, and personally for me, I found a God that rebuilt it and brought it back to functioning, working order. So there's a personal touch with that. But the second reason why I do this is I've always been a history junkie, and I've always enjoyed just like old photos of people and old photos of places, and just going back in time, exploring how different life was back then. And I think of the same thing every time I go into a place. It's like, what kind of people were here, right? What if the walls could talk, what history would they share with me? And I think it's just so cool that we get to go into these places and document history in a way that a lot of people are afraid to do. Like,
Yeah.
we see the urbex scene as it seems like it's pretty big, but if you compare it to all the people that would never step foot in an abandoned building, it's pretty small. So it's like it's a sense of adventure, it's a sense of adrenaline, it's a sense of historical documentation, but also the people that you meet along the way. It's almost like you fuel each other, like
Mm-hmm.
I've met so many close friends that I talk to on a daily basis through this, that I never knew I really needed. Like they came in at the right time, and the relationships are just so strong and so good. And every single person views these places. You could have four photographers in the same place, and they see different things. So you get to see people's individuality, and the way that they see life and the way that they see things. And it's just like, there's so much you learn. So for a person who just likes to learn as much as he can, that's a huge thing. And it's just a passion. It's not, people think it's like, oh, it's just a hobby. Like, okay, you like doing this in your downtime, and you're like, no, you don't understand. Like, if I go 2 weeks without being in some kind of broken building, I start to get restless. you
Mm-hmm.
know. So it's just it's a passion, and it's just so cool that, like, we get to do this. Like, it's
Yeah.
it's kind of hard to explain. I've stood in so many places, and I'm just like, this is what I do. Like, this is so
Yeah.
cool. um but yeah, definitely for me, those two things have a huge play in why I do this still.
Yeah, for sure. I remember the first time I went into an abandoned church, and, I looked around at the stained glass, and there were Bibles left on the floor. All the pews were still there. The piano was there. And, I just looked at my friend, and I was like, why did they leave? Like,
Yeah.
why did they abandon the church? Like, that's like the craziest abandoned place to me for some reason, is like, why did you leave like the house of God? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, where did you go? Like, what
Yeah.
happened? You know? And like, I always want to like find somebody that ran the church and just ask them like, what happened to this place? Like, you know, and most of the churches, all the churches I've been into have been torn down. Unfortunately, you know, I get emails on a daily basis like, where's this spot at? Like, I want to film a movie here. And I'm like, it's gone, yo. Like, you missed your chance by like 4 years, bro. Like,
Yep. I've
it's
been there.
gone. But yeah, I mean, there's something so special about abandoned churches. And I think abandoned churches and asylums for me are my favorite places to explore. I just think that there's something so just extra magical about those places. One, the church, just because like it baffles me why people would leave, and asylums because they have such a dark history in this world, you know, like the horror stories behind abandoned asylums are just rampant, you know. And like boys prisons, like kids prisons, like the shit that happened at those places, always dark, you know. And that's a huge reason we got rid of like asylums in this country, was because of all the horrible things and experimentation and just horrid things that people did to each other. But the fact that we get to step foot and walk in those places and, you know, capture where they are now just kind of goes to show like we kind of leave our messes behind, like as a society, as a civilization, like humans, we just leave trash behind, but some of us find beauty in that trash.
Yeah, no, that's a really good way to look at it. You know, and I've asked a lot of people who don't explore, you know, because I like to share my photos with people that I talk to, you know, just
Sure.
at my church or whatever. And they've always kind of said that it's so crazy to see a church, which was a place that was meant for healing and repair, to be abandoned and fall into disrepair. And you know, a lot of the churches in Detroit, there were you know, congregations that would move from one building to another building, or as the city declined, you know, so many people had to leave the city. It's interesting. I don't know if you know like much about Detroit's history, but the auto industry, which made it boom, was actually its downfall, because once they started bulldozing suburbs to make you know, make way for highways, it forced a lot of people who could afford to move out of the city out. And a lot of these people were people who were going to these churches, because when the city boomed with all the car purchases, they needed to make churches for every different ethnicity and heritage that was coming into the city at such a rapid rate. So, you know, it's just mind blowing to see that, you know, this, you have so many churches, especially around here, where once they were just filled with congregations, that there are images of them, you know, praying at altars, and people just weeping and crying because they're experiencing just, you know, healing and community. And then you see pictures of them now, and they're covered in VPS panels, and the basements are flooded, and, you know, it's nuts. But yeah, I'm right there with you too, by the way. I love churches. I've only been to like a select few asylums, so I can't really say that asylums are my favorite, but churches and funeral homes I love. Those are my two favorite ones for sure.
Yeah, see, I've never done a funeral home, so I don't know that
Oh,
experience. But I
you
gotta.
have to. You have to. It is so eerie.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
dead people. Yeah, that's eerie as hell. Like, of course.
Especially when they leave, like there's like a ton of casket displays and stuff in there too, or the mortuary table or the preparation tables. You know, it's just like it's wild, you know. And I've seen people who they'll do like modeling, and they're laying on those things, and I'm like,
Nope.
what if there's still fluid on there or something? That's so gross. But I mean,
Oh.
hey, see, you know, some people are just more ballsy. But
That,
yeah,
yeah.
you got to hit one for sure. Like
Definitely.
that's got to be on your must list.
Oh yeah. And if you could live in one abandoned place you've explored for an entire week, which place would it be?
Oh man. Okay. Let's see. That's a hard one. That's a hard one, because there is, I guess there's two I could consider. One I'll name drop. It's a pretty common one here, but there's a school called Kettering High School. The auditorium in there is in great shape. like fantastic shape. All the seats are still perfectly neat. Um, there's so much space, and for some reason, there's a serenity to it. It's like
Mm.
it's a very peaceful auditorium, and a lot of people that I've talked to who have hit this school, um, pretty much say the same thing. There's just something about this one that has a piece to it. But there's this one church here that I can't give away,
Sure.
um, but it's almost untouched. There's the only decay in there is natural decay,
Wow.
and all of the stained glass is still in there. It hasn't been busted out. No one's thrown rocks through it or broken anything. There's no tags inside the church at all. It's kind of weird, like now that I think about it, because the majority of spots in Detroit, this is kind of how it happens. One person blows it up,
Yeah.
someone finds it, shares it with everybody. Everybody rushes to it, and then within a couple weeks, it's just destroyed. That's usually the culture for some reason in a lot of places. But I know a lot of people who have been to this church, and for some reason, no one's done anything. They just leave it alone. It's like
Wow.
there's like this. It's like there's an unwritten respect rule for this church. Um, but I'd camp out there in a heartbeat. It's beautiful. Everything is still intact. All the pews are still in there. There's barely any decay. It's just like some natural chipping off the wall of some paint. Stained glass is still in there. The chair that the priest would sit in is still in there.
Wow.
Statues of Jesus and him on a wooden crucifix is still in there. The podium, uh, like the doors that it looks like Louis Vuitton made these doors. I'll give that hint, but they're so well made. They have this giant. I think it's a holy water chalice. I think, or like something where it would pump holy water from or water from, but that's still there. The basement is clean, which is really rare. Um, yeah, I would definitely camp out in that one. That would be awesome.
Wow. Amazing. God, I love hearing about the clean spots that are like more respected, because I think that's a huge thing that is kind of with the rise of this new, I don't want to say new wave, but like the fad urban explorers that are like doing it because like TikTok clout or like,
Yeah.
we're bored during COVID, whatever. And they were like, we should just get into this for now because like we could get a bunch of views, whatever. And they're not really in it for the right reasons. I think that
Right.
that's a huge reason that a lot of these buildings are getting, destroyed, and, people are destroying things in these buildings for a TikTok video. Like, what are you, stop it. Like, don't do that. That's not why we do this,
Exactly.
And, what do you hope for the future of urban exploring?
I mean, I really hope that preservation starts to take over a lot of people's mentalities in this.
Mm-hmm.
I really stick true to the take nothing but photos and leave nothing but footprints motto of this thing, just because, some people will just make excuses and they say, oh, it's not your building. You shouldn't care anyway. It's an abandoned building anyway. But, like people do care. And we want to preserve these places so that when people do find them, we don't want them walking into absolute trash.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that people will start to learn to respect these spots, and will really just take into consideration, like how can I put my best foot forward to keep these places here, and let them be clean for another person who happens to find it and comes to enjoy it. Like if you go into any of the schools in Detroit, pretty much, I'd say like 90% of them are scrapped to the bone. They're absolutely destroyed. Just tags and broken glass and pieces everywhere. And I'm not blaming that on just urban explorers, but
Of course.
I do think that like if we had a better mentality of preserving these places and doing our part to keep them in nice shape while we're in there, I think that would have a big effect. And that's kind of what I line myself up with people that I shoot with who have that kind of same mentality. I don't know if you knew, but I'm one of the members of Ruin Road. I don't know if you know
Oh, wow.
about them.
No.
But we've got our own YouTube channel and everything, and we're like a 4-man group, and we're all about preservation and just trying to document places to, have people enjoy them and seeing them, and I guess keep the passion kind of growing.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Definitely. I mean, going back to the preservation and what you do with abandoned houses, I should link you up with After the Final Curtain. He explores abandoned theaters around the country, and
Oh,
he
sweet.
helps them to get revamped and turned into other things and kind of restore them. So that's like his whole thing is documenting the before and after of these places, from decay to restoration. It's super cool, and I've had him on the show as well. I would recommend you check out that episode as well to hear
Yeah.
more of his story and what he does. But I think you guys could do some amazing things together, in the future of restoring some of these places. And I love to link up people that are like-minded in that facet. So definitely would recommend that episode, and I'll link you up with him as well on Instagram after this. But
That'd be sick.
yeah, definitely have a chat with him. He's super, super cool. So do you have any bucket list places, like goal places you're dying to explore?
Yes. I really, really, really want to get a castle at some point.
Ooh.
I'd love to go overseas to, Belgium or Germany or whatever, and just get some kind of castle spot, even if it's like a castle-ish looking church. Just something like, there's something about their, like the way they keep their spots in check and they keep them nice. They have like a different mentality of things.
Yeah.
But I definitely want to go overseas, try to shoot pretty much anything over there. There is a church in New York. It's I don't want to say it's super well known, but it's a church that I'll give you this hint. It's a church that has the stained glass is two domes, kind of, and there's a flaming cross in the middle of it, and the seats are all red velvet, and it looks like a theater. I want that one so bad. I've seen so many pictures of it, and we're trying to, me and the Ruin Road boys are trying to make a couple trips this year. One of them is going to be out to New York, hopefully. So I
Amazing.
definitely want to hit that spot really bad. And then let me see. Is there anyone? Actually, I guess there's a spot down here that I want to hit too. We call it the LimeWire School.
Okay.
It's pretty hard to hit. It's really watched. And a lot of people who I know that have gotten into it have been chased out by locals pretty gosh darn quickly. So I definitely would love to try to make my way in there. But every single time I go over there, it eludes me. But I'm gonna keep trying. Keep trying.
Yeah, absolutely. So last question for you is, what is something you know now that you wish you knew when you started exploring?
Oh, aside from don't run, because you just look super suspicious.
Yeah.
I guess it would be don't get comfortable. Like, these places are always changing, and you never know what you're going to run into on a revisit. And I've heard a lot of many worse horror stories that I've ever experienced in abandoned places before. And that kind of woke me up to, like, hey, even if you've been to the same spot from time to time, don't get comfortable. You never know how it's going to change. So definitely knowing that, from where I started to where I know now, it's definitely altered the way I explore, but it's made my, I guess, like, the mission of hitting a certain spot a little more precise and accurate. Like, we're not in there to just go in there and chill and goof off and break stuff and be loud. We're in there to get shots, go home, and look back and be like, yes, I got that. I've been gunning for that place for God knows how long, and I finally got it. So that's a big thing for me. But yeah, I think that would be probably the biggest one.
Definitely. So if people want to keep following your journey into abandonment, where can they find you online? Drop all your social media that you want people to know about.
They can find me on Instagram at it's the.trespastor. So they can find me there. They can also check out some of the stuff that I do with my team at Ruin Road. We're on YouTube, and Ruin Road is also on Instagram. The guys that I'm with on that group are just super awesome dudes. and they put out a lot of great content too. And then I also have a small group that I have on Facebook with 3 of my Detroit local friends that we call the Goon Squad. That's based off of Welcome to Detroit by Eminem.
Yep.
So we have that one, and those are a couple of buddies that are local to Detroit with me as well. But those would be the three main sources. Would be the 2 Instagram channels and that Facebook channel. So yep.
That was the Trespastor. Go check him out on Instagram. Go check out Ruin Road. Go check out the Goon Squad. All of his links are down in the description for you guys, as usual. Thank you so much for listening to No Tracers again this week. I am currently in Europe. If you're listening to this podcast, it means that I am in Europe right now with my band Matriarchs. Hopefully I'm in an abandoned building as you're listening to this. Hopefully you are exploring an abandoned building or on your way to exploring an abandoned building while listening to this podcast. I love to know where you guys listen. I get a lot of DMs that are like, yo, I'm on my way to a bando listening to your podcast right now. Like, those are my favorite DMs to get. Like, I love that stuff. So thank you for listening. If you enjoy the show, please leave a rating and feedback on Apple Podcasts. It helps us grow in the society and culture section of Apple Podcasts. We are smashing through numbers right now. Like, thank you guys for sharing the podcast with your friends. It's growing so big, and I'm so very grateful for it. Thank you. If you want to support the podcast, like I said at the beginning of the show, there's a ton of ways to do so, like with Death Mountain Water, or you can get some merch. You can get a copy of my new book, which is an urban exploring guidebook. Thank you for listening. I will talk to you next week. If you want to come on the show, hit me up at no.tracers. And if you have a story you want to share that you don't necessarily want to share like on the show as a guest, even anonymously, you can email me at contact@notracers.com. You can also email me with guest recommendations, people you would like to hear on the show. Until next Friday, my name's Kay. I'm known as No Tracers. Follow me on all social media at No Tracers urbex on YouTube. And I'll talk to you guys very soon. Stay strong, keep enduring, go out, go explore something. And remember, leave no trace.